right?
Yes, sure. Sure.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, I will briefly introduce the meeting. Then I
Okay.
give the floor to our discussant, uh,
Yes.
called to introduce your presentation, and then you have the floor for about 30 minutes, okay?
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, good morning everyone, and welcome all at the Scuola Superiore of the University of Catania, celebrating today, April 22, the International Earth Day to 2021 with Dr. Vandana Shiva, our special guest, world-renowned environmental activist on the theme of Earth democracy. As well known, the UN General Assembly designated April 22 as the International Mother Earth Day through a resolution adopted in 2009. But the original roots of this inspirational day go back to the 70s when environmental protection was not yet a priority of the national political agendas. And first of all, let me briefly introduce myself. I'm Adriana Di Stefano, Dean of the Social Science and Humanities class here at the School of Catania, chairing this session in place of the scheduled chairperson, our president, Professor Maria Rosaria Maugeri, was unable to join us due to unforeseen institutional commitments. So I thank our president, Professor Maugeri, and convey her personal apologies for her absence today. The title of our meeting reminds us a book of Vandana Shiva, Earth, Democracy, Justice, Sustainability and Peace, also published in Italy as Il bene comune della terra, where she suggests a kind of a radical shift in the values that govern democracies and strongly condemn the role that unrestricted capitalism and, widely speaking, globalization have played in the destruction of environments and livelihoods. The democratic and ecological project inspiring Vandana Shiva has an history that goes back a long way, but also constitute the underlying objective of emerging political movements that defend peace, justice, and sustainability in the transnational civil society as well as in international public opinion. Conceiving the planet as a great community and as an inalienable common good for all the forms of life that populate it means connecting the particular and the universal, the local and the global dimension, specific diversity and common grounds. But it also means recalling what in India is described as the earth family, the community of all living forms that draw their sustenance from our planet. The global democracy movement is shaped by the recognition of this correlation and of the rights and responsibilities that flows from them. Well, here at Scuola Superiore of Catania, we are an academic institution of excellence, strongly committed to the promotion of the sustainability goals, inspiring the United Nations agenda. And we are undertaking efforts to stimulate public debate on issues related to the values, rights, economies and culture of sustainability, ecology, public common goods, starting from the local level. Today's celebration meets our institutional third mission goals of spreading free ideas about ambientalist, ecologist, and solidaristic instances engaged with sustainability and justice across the transnational community of both private and public actors. Far beyond our two main missions, education and research, we do believe in the importance of populating our classrooms also with other alternative voices outside scientific circles and away from any positioning, with a neutral and free attitude available to listen and to open critical discussion on the major issues of contemporary debates. Our democracy embodies complex, intersectional, political, global and local questions coming from below. So many thanks to Vandana and from being with us today and for sharing her views and cultural approaches on the never-ending transformations of democratic ideals and utopias in facing contemporary challenges. The rationale behind our Mother Earth Day celebration 2021 is thus merely institutional and purely dialogical. We hope to continue this dialogue in further occasion within our community of students, professors, and guests in a spirit of true commitments and solidarity. It's time now to give the floor or the screen to Dr. Gesualdo Busacca, who will introduce Vandana Shiva and the main topic of today. We would like to thank him most sincerely for making this meeting possible and for joining us in the role of discussant. Gesualdo graduated in archaeology at the University of Catania. He's a Scuola Superiore alumnus, got a PhD in anthropology at Stanford University. And back to homeland, back to Sicily, he's a passionate activist on biodiversity and ecological issues, but also a freelance translator and editor. Not least, please allow me to thank all our staff. Our great team at Scuola Superiore of Catania, especially Professor Angilella, Dean of the Scientific Class, for all time-consuming efforts and sincere cooperation in scheduling and managing our virtual colloquia series in time of pandemic. Let's start then. Thanks again. Gesualdo, please, you have the screen.
All right, thank you, Adriana. Thank you so much for the introduction. I want to first of all thank Vandana Shiva for being with us today on this very special day of celebration. I am a strong believer of every day is Earth Day, but I also recognize that the importance of rituals and the importance of celebrating also our care and our struggle for the Earth. And so thank you so much for doing this today with us. And when we thought of Vandana as our guest for this important day with Adriana, we wouldn't think that she would accept, because probably she's a lot of meetings to attend on this on Earth Day, especially. So it's very we are very pleased to have you, Vandana. So thank you so much. If you allow me, I'm gonna quickly switch back into Italian because our audience is mostly Italian speaking. So I really want to give them a clear sense of who you are and the topic we are gonna discuss today. It's gonna be just a few minutes, then I'll switch back to English and I'll give you the floor. All right, thank you. Quindi, dicevo, vorrei fare un breve intervento in italiano per permettere al grandissimo pubblico che ci sta seguendo, che è in particolare un pubblico italiano, di conoscere non fino in fondo, ma comunque almeno di avere un'introduzione sulla nostra ospite di oggi e più su quello di cui tratterà nel suo intervento. Vandana Shiva, molti di voi la conoscete già, è una delle maggiori animatrici del movimento ecologista internazionale, è la cofondatrice dell'International Forum on Globalization, è anche un membro molto attivo della Women's and Environment and Development Organization ed è anche consulente per diverse agenzie governative, è stata anche consulente del Ministero dell'Istruzione del governo Conte, in Italia è anche vicepresidente di Slow Food. Sono tantissime le organizzazioni a livello internazionale con cui collabora. Vandana viene da un background scientifico, si è laureata in fisica e ha conseguito un dottorato in filosofia della scienza in Canada, ma quando è tornata nel suo paese natale, in un territorio nel nord dell'India, resasi conto del degrado ambientale di quelle zone, ha deciso di occuparsi principalmente di attivismo ambientalista ed ecologista, soprattutto concentrandosi sui temi della sovranità alimentare e della difesa della biodiversità. Per questo l'organizzazione che lei ha ispirato, che si chiama Navdanya, che significa 9 semi, ma anche nuovi doni. È attiva fin dagli anni 80 in India, creando banche dei semi che tutelino la biodiversità tradizionale dell'agricoltura indiana, ma anche con altre attività che soprattutto incoraggiano un'agricoltura biologica, rigenerativa, non inquinante, basata sui saperi tradizionali e sul ruolo centrale delle donne che tradizionalmente occupano davvero un ruolo molto importante nell'agricoltura. È autrice di più di 20 libri, tra cui molti sono stati tradotti anche in italiano, tra cui, a parte quello che menzionava la professoressa Di Stefano, anche Monoculture della mente, Terra Madre, Sopravvivere allo sviluppo, Le guerre dell'acqua, Ritorno alla terra, la fine dell'imperialismo, Chi nutrirà il mondo, Manifesto per il cibo del terzo millennio, e più recentemente, nel 2019, Feltrinelli ha pubblicato Il pianeta di tutti, come il capitalismo ha colonizzato la terra. Vandana è principalmente nota, ed è un punto che voglio focalizzare particolarmente, per la qualità intersezionale del suo attivismo, che abbraccia istanze femministe, ecologiste, anti-imperialiste, decolonialiste, nella convinzione che queste diverse forme di azione facciano parte dello stesso cammino verso un futuro più giusto e vivibile per le generazioni che verranno. Oggi infatti l'intervento di Vandana si focalizzerà sul tema dell'interconnessione, che è un tema fondamentale all'interno della sua filosofia. Innanzitutto interconnessione tra le diverse emergenze che oggi gravano sul nostro pianeta, quella sanitaria che ci sembra l'emergenza per antonomasia, ma è solamente una delle emergenze, quella climatica e ambientale, anche quella delle disuguaglianze. Ma l'interconnessione è anche al centro di questo cambio generale di paradigma che Adriana ha già un po' introdotto, che lei chiama Earth Democracy, una democrazia planetaria che si basa sul riconoscimento della nostra interconnessione come esseri umani al resto del pianeta e sul passaggio da una logica di separazione e superiorità che è intrinseca in una parte della nostra cultura occidentale a un paradigma diverso sull'inclusione, sulla comunità e appunto su questa democrazia planetaria. Vi ricordo che potete, speriamo che ci sia abbastanza tempo, nonostante il ritardo iniziale, potete prenotarvi per fare delle domande alla fine, scrivendo nella chat in italiano o in inglese e le rivolgerò io alla nostra ospite, oppure alzando la mano vi metterò in ordine per la risposta. Okay, so now back to English again. Just to give you a recap, Vandana, I just introduced you about your biography, but also I really focus on the theme of intersectionality, which I think makes you such a unique person to talk about really how all these activisms are interconnected. You know, the environmentalists, the feminists, the decolonialist struggle are all part of a path toward a just transition toward a livable future, and so they're so important how to stress how they are interconnected. And in fact, interconnectedness is one of the keywords of your philosophy, and I think also of your talk today, because really the emergencies that we face today, the medical one, but also the climatic one, are very interconnected, as we as people are interconnected with the earth and with each other. So without further ado, I will give you virtually, unfortunately, the floor, and thank you again for joining us on this day of celebration for the earth. Thank you.
And I will just speak, or do I have to stop for translations?
No, we don't have a service of translation, so just speak. I can give a recap in the end if there is an interest in people.
Sure.
But yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, and greetings to all of you from India. on this Mother Earth Day, where we are asked to wake up to our relationship with Mother Earth, to the recognition that the Earth is not dead matter to be exploited, but not only the source of all life, of our breath, of our water, of our food, of our cultures, but she is living. She is self-organized. That's why James Lovelock called her Gaia, the Greek goddess. We call her Vasundhara, Bhumi. We have 1,000 names for the living earth, for the living Mother Earth. I have woken up to the different dimensions through my life's journey to protect the earth. And of course, through my training of non-separation. For me, interconnectedness is the very function of thinking. Overcoming separation is what we have to do in our times, because over 300-400 years, what is called the Enlightenment, which is totally the opposite of the Italian Renaissance, was about division, separation, fragmentation, reductionism, mechanism. I did my PhD in the foundations of quantum theory on the topic of non-locality and non-separability in quantum theory. So quantum theory tells us there is no separation. Everything is connected and everything is in potential. It's constantly evolving. And because evolution can go in multiple directions, there is uncertainty. But my first involvement in the ecological activism began with a beautiful movement in my region. I come from the Himalaya, and I'm locked down back home in Dehradun, in the Himalaya. And women came out to hug the trees. And at that time, the colonial forestry was dominant. The British had colonized India. British created a company called East India Company to colonize India. It's from 1600 onwards. In 1757, they actually invaded and took over Bengal. And then they started to go through all of India, changing the way we govern ourselves. We were governed in self-organized villages, just like in Italy, you have a system of communes. The local system governs itself. And one reason the movements have been powerful in the past in Italy is because the communes could make the decision to be GMO-free, to be toxic-free, to be glyphosate-free. The British did three things. They enclosed 3 commons. First, they took our land and made it their property, literally their property. And then they started to collect rents from the original people, the peasants. And then the peasants were dying of famine because they were taking half as rents and taxes. And England grew rich. The calculations are $45 trillion were transferred from India to England in 2 short centuries. 45 trillion. So we were the richest country when they started, and they left us in poverty and became the richest country. That's how colonialism works. But a lot of people don't realize that the economy is modeled on colonialism, and I will touch a little bit on some of these roots. And I learned them through my practical work and my research for communities. So when the women came out to protect the forests, I went back to look at the history of forestry. My own father had been a forest conservator, but for me it was, walking with him in the forest and trekking 50 miles and just the beauty of the forest. So when I went into the history, I realized the British took the forest communities and turned them into timber mines. And the women came out and said, no, but these are not timber mines. These are the sources of our soil and water and pure air. And you don't realize that by cutting these trees, you are destroying our life. You're creating floods. You're creating landslides. In 1970, there had been a landslide after logging. This year, in the same place where the Chipko movement started, we had another disaster because now more forests, the forests weren't supposed to be logged, but when you build more and more roads, you build more and more dams, the forests go. You have glacial melt because of climate change. And You have dam building on a ferocious stage. So it's like I wrote a piece. I wrote a piece on my blog, 40 years of warnings and 40 years of deafness, and the Himalaya is crying. But the earth is crying. For me, climate change is one aspect of the earth's cry. Disappearance of species is another aspect. The spread of pandemics is another aspect. In India, we have a very, very severe crisis in what they call the second wave. But now young people are dying. Around me, 3 of my colleagues, entire families, have been knocked down. And this is not how we're supposed to live. Where did these pandemics start? I've done a piece called Reflections on the Coronavirus. Actually, I was supposed to have come to Italy then, and suddenly the lockdowns were announced, so I had to rush back. And on the flight back, I wrote my essay. Where are these viruses coming from? And I did a little bit of research, whether it's Ebola or HIV or Zika or SARS. They are all spillover effects by invasions into forests. Why should we be growing GMO soya in the Amazon when we have all of our beautiful agriculture in Italy, in India? Why shouldn't we be chopping down the Indonesian rainforest for palm oils when you have the beautiful olive oil? It's absolutely unnecessary. It's not that there's shortage of food, but greed does not know limits. And greed is taking our food and turning it into biofuel, turning it into animal feed. And then there's no limit to how many forests you must destroy, how many pandemics you must create. And then the greed comes in. Both my culture here in India, with our absolutely rich diversity of food, and Italy, and particularly southern Italy, you are so rich in your food. But if you can grow your good tomatoes and make your good food, or you have your 5 olive trees and your own olive oil, where does the global system make its money? They make the money by, first step, turn agriculture into chemical farming, industrial farming. Second step, turn seeds into GMOs, patent them. This has been my life's work. Third step, now fake food. How can you have real olive oil? How can mothers feed their babies with real breast milk? We're going to make it in the lab and pretend we are solving the climate problem. These are all climate-funded projects. Fake food in the lab, impossible burger, 14 patents. And there is this imagination. If we make all of the food artificial, look at the amount of money. Silicon Valley is already betting on how many trillions they can make through force-feeding bad food. But already processed and junk food, over the last 30 years of globalization, have given us an epidemic of chronic diseases. We've done a manifesto on food for health, and we've shown the burden that families are carrying with chronic diseases like diabetes, obesity, neurological problems, cancer, infertility. The list is endocrine disruption, all of them related to food, all of them disrupting our gut bacteria. We have lived for thousands of years, and we know how to eat well. And each of the places evolves its food culture according to the biodiversity of that land. My land gives us mustard. Your land gives you olive oil. We have perfected our diets and our health through this. How did we go wrong? Not because we chose to, not because humanity evolved into stupidity. No, colonialism happened along the way. And with it, from that little island, which has now exited from the European Council, Little Britain, worked out and manufactured intellectual constructions that have given us the crisis we are in, the climate change, the extinction crisis, pandemic, disease, unemployment, poverty, despair, lack of democracy. First step, they said Earth is dead. Bacon wrote a book called Masculine Birth of Time, that thinking that the Earth is alive is feminine. Masculinity, domination requires declaring her dead and subjugating her and exploiting her and establishing an empire over her. Descartes said everything's a machine. And when you chop up an animal and it cries, it's just a machine creaking. And he went further to say, there are no qualities in the world. There is only dimension to be measured. If you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. But connectedness is not measured. It is a process. It's a process in space and time, in four-dimensional causality. Health of a whole being is an expression of wholesomeness. Disease can be measured. Health is lived. So terra madre was turned into terra nullius, the empty land. And those of us who occupied these lands which were declared empty were declared as not being fully human. We became primitive. We became barbarians. We became inferior. And then entire architecture was created to say we as humans are separate. The word for this in Afrikaans is apartheid, apartness. We fought against apartheid between humans. But we need now to deal with an eco-apartheid, this artificial separation between humans and the earth. When we are part of the earth, we wouldn't be alive if we didn't have breath, if we didn't have water, if we didn't have food. All of this comes from the earth. All of these are the true currencies. These currencies are the flow of energy, the flow of nutrition, the flow of water, and all of them work in cycles of renewal. That is ecology. That is what you teach in your university. So the human apartheid and the eco-apartheid have separated us from nature and us from each other. The divide and rule philosophy that the British totally implemented in India, splitting us, creating countries, artificial countries, drawing lines. My mother was trapped in what overnight became Pakistan and became a refugee. It was one country. And then anthropocentrism, the idea that humans are superior to other species. It was mentioned that, because Earth democracy, I evolved it from the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that Earth is one family. The indigenous people of the Americas think that all beings are relatives. The Aboriginal people of Australia think that. Everyone's a relative. The Earth is our mother. We are children of the Earth. This is common knowledge of all indigenous cultures, but not of the colonizer. And out of this came a way of thinking about knowledge and nature, a way of thinking about economy which had two dimensions. The first dimension was creation of private property through enclosures of the commons. And for this, Locke justified it in his book, The Creation of Government. And he actually says that the transformation of nature is how property is created. But it's not the property of the peasant who works the land. It's the property of the person who controls the peasant who works the land. This is the spiritual labor of capital. So here's a fiction called Capital. It's a construct. In Italy, I mean, in your language, in Latin, capital is derived from caput, a number of animals you own. That used to be the wealth in India too. But now capital as money is a total construct. And it is dead. But this fictitious construct is supposed to create what actually the earth creates and what people create. And out of this came the appropriation of land and property, and now seeds and genetic resources, the mining of our data. And if you look at Adam Smith, which became the textbook of economics, oikonomia means the art of living. Oikonomia is derived from the same word oikos, from which the word ecology is derived. Ecology just like we are children of Mother Earth, economy is a subset of ecology. It's a subsidiary of ecology. And it has to work on the same laws. Ecology is the science of knowing how nature works. Economy is the management of our household, both our particular households of the place where we are, as well as our planetary household, our common Mother Earth. But today, economy, as it's grown from the fiction of capital, the fiction of a corporation, the fiction, it has so many layers of fiction. The economy today has become very abstract. And its abstractness has resulted in what I have called in my latest book, the oneness versus the 1%. In nature, everything is interconnected. In societies, we live in communities. We live in interconnectedness. In the fictitious economy, which first became capital, it was money, which was real exchange, was fictionalized and abstracted to capital. Then it was financialized, removed even further. And you might remember 2008, there was a crash of Wall Street. But who paid for that crash? Italy, Greece, Spain, Portugal, Southern Europe had to pay by giving up their lives. Austerity. In Greece, they started to tax the olive trees. In Italy, they started to tax the home on the farm. So these austerity measures became a new level of extraction. Adam Smith says we are born with competition in our womb. No, if there was competition in the womb, the baby would compete with its mother to death, or the mother would compete the baby to death. No, mothers give life to their babies. And for 9 months, every one of us has been nourished in the womb of our mothers. If we functioned in economy like mothers function, like Mother Earth functions and mothers function, we would realize that care is the true currency. Care is the true economy. Giving is the economy, not grabbing, not extracting. And these are the issues that preoccupy me today. And of course, I articulated a democracy after the collapse of the World Trade Organization meeting in Seattle. And I said, this idea that the world is a commodity and everything's about commerce and trade and profits is so wrong, that we are one Earth family and we have known how to live better. We don't have to have economies that destroy and kill when we can and have had economies that generate life. We don't have to have democracies that have become so meaningless that the more money a corporation or a billionaire can pour into an election decides who will win. And I have said this again and again. Electoral democracy has become from being of the people, for the people, by the people, to of the corporation, by the corporations, for the corporations, and even worse, of the billionaires, by the billionaires, for the billionaires. The rules are rewritten by them. We need rules written according to the Mother Earth, according to human rights. And my latest report, which is up on our website, is the subject of my talk with you today. What are our most basic rights? Our most basic right is to be alive, the right to life. How do we get life? We have to have food to eat, we have to have water to drink, and we have to have air to breathe, oxygen to breathe. Most of the deaths in India happening today is for lack of oxygen, because this pandemic depletes your oxygen levels. So you need external oxygen. So the external oxygen is in crisis. But if we weren't sick, our relationship with the earth would be giving us oxygen, not because we create oxygen, but because of the amazing interconnectedness between us and plants, where the plants take the sunshine. Through photosynthesis, they take the carbon dioxide, they convert this into the carbohydrates that give us everything we need, including our food, as well as the oxygen we breathe. Now, many of the false solutions to climate change are totally denying these life processes. I'll give you 2 examples. There is an attempt right now to do geoengineering And sadly, Mr. Bill Gates is financing these experiments, but I'm very happy, and it's a very good example of a democracy that we have managed through a local action in Sweden by the Sami, who stopped an experiment of geoengineering and weather modification. Now, many of these geoengineering experiments are to block the sun through pollution. But if you block the sun, you won't have photosynthesis. You won't have life on Earth. And I've debated with Nobel laureates who are promoting geoengineering. And I say, but you know, this will be a consequence of blocking the sun. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. And that's the problem. We've had such super level of breakdown of reductionism that the best minds know only one little tiny bit and don't know anymore how the system works, how the Earth system, how the living systems work. So the principles of Earth democracy for me are first and foremost the recognition that the Earth is alive, that we are not separate from the Earth, we are part of the Earth, that we are one Earth family. And not only are we not separate from the Earth, we are not unequal as human beings. After all, we have a declaration on the rights of human rights written after the wars and after the genocide of Hitler. The UN Declaration recognizes that all human beings are equal and have equal right to live and equal dignity and equal right to freedom. We are one humanity on one planet. One of the things I'm going to be doing today is joining the Bolivians and addressing their parliament for a big meeting, because after the failure of the climate summit in Copenhagen, the president of Bolivia said, we were here to defend the rights of Mother Earth, not the rights of the polluters. And I'm going to go back and call citizens of the world to write a declaration on the rights of Mother Earth. And my recent art paper is about how we make rights of Mother Earth and human rights one set of rights, because they are. If the Earth is destroyed, we do not have oxygen to breathe. We do not have water to drink. We have toxics everywhere. We have disease. We have invaded forests, and we have pandemics. And we don't have food. Or if we have food, it's toxic food. The Earth's rights guarantees human rights. And because the Earth is our mother, our role is a duty to protect, a duty to care. And in my lifetime, I have now realized that the highest practice of this care is through the land. Agriculture used to mean the care for the land. Today, it means the war against the land. And not only is it a war against the land, it has given us 50% of all greenhouse gases. Industrial farming has given us 75% destruction of the land, 75% destruction of water, insects 80% destroyed because of pesticides and insecticides, plant varieties destroyed because of monocultures. Biodiversity destruction is because of industrial agriculture, including the biodiversity of the forest, because industrial agriculture, being a limitless appetite, commodity agriculture for greed, doesn't know when to stop. On the other hand, ecological agriculture, biodiverse agriculture, regenerates biodiversity on our biodiversity farm at Navdanya. And we, through evolution, Earth University has grown on this farm, where I began by saving seeds. And of course, we practice organic farming, but our soils have 100% more nitrogen than when we started, 100% more organic matter, zinc 14% more, and the chemical farms have lost 34% zinc. They've lost magnesium. They've lost nutrition. We are producing nutritionally empty commodities. No wonder there are so many sicknesses. Our water level has come up 70 feet, which means we regenerate water. The farmers are growing more food when you measure it not in terms of Cartesian yield, but in terms of nutrition and health, because that's what the food cycle is supposed to give us. Food is the currency of life, and intensifying food and nutrition is what a good system does. We have measured health per acre and nutrition per acre. We can feed 2 times India's population by intensifying biodiversity, conserving biodiversity, intensifying the conversion of the sunshine into biodiversity and putting it back in the soil in terms of nutrition. We're regenerating the soil. And when we have more organic carbon in the soil and more nitrogen in the soil, the broken cycles of carbon and nitrogen that has given us the climate catastrophe, we can start to heal it. And the data is showing that with care, we can intensify these cycles so much that we could build up 10 tons per hectare of organic matter. And that means in 10 years, we can bring down all the excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And you are a culture of beings, you know. The Mediterranean diet, the West, which was eating only meat, suddenly realized, oh my God, why are the Italians so healthy? And they suddenly found the bean. And I think the studies were done in Italy, in Sicily. Well, the bean is not just miraculous as a protein. You don't have to do a genetically engineered GMO soya burger. We can just eat beans. We can eat dal. The beauty of it is beans and pulses in our diet give us nourishment, but they also fix nitrogen in a non-violent way. We don't have to blast fossil fuels at 400 degrees to fix atmospheric nitrogen to make explosives, which also makes the synthetic fertilizers. Sadly, there are people like Bill Gates promoting synthetic fertilizers as a solution to climate change when we know that synthetic fertilizers emit nitrous oxide, which is 300 times more damaging to the climate than carbon dioxide. We have the science, we have the wisdom. All we need now is the confidence, because through the pandemic and the fear that's being created and the nervousness all over the place, people are panicking. We cannot afford to panic. This is the time to build Earth democracy so that we can reclaim our health. And reclaiming our health is reclaiming the health of the planet. This is the time to reclaim our oneness and our interconnectedness. Also because while on the one hand in the front is the virus, behind it is the creation of the new level of colonization through what I call a digital dictatorship and what Zuzana Zenef has called surveillance capitalism, where we ourselves become the latest raw material. We become the mine. Data of our brain activity and our bodily data is already being mined. It took me half an hour to get into this because at every step, there's data mining taking place. And of course, because I've written too many books about Gates, Microsoft has to mine hell of a lot of data from me. And they must have got quite a bit today. This data mining means we are being turned into raw material. Our humanity is being taken away from us. We need a new renaissance. And it is places like Italy, which was European, but not Anglo-Saxon, which was not part of the Enlightenment and the fragmented reductionist, mechanistic reductionism that became the basis of justifying greed, justifying violence, justifying money-making as the end of human life. You have amazing thinking. In Europe, when I try and go to meanings of words, it's eventually through the Latin meaning we get the original word. Innovation did not mean destroy. Innovation meant to make new. Invest did not mean get returns on money. The British East India Company changed the meaning of investment. You called it making beautiful. The investor ceremony of universities is based on that. We are at a moment where we need to draw deep into our deepest knowledge. We need to draw deep into our cultures to address the new fragmentations, the new colonizations. And I will end by just saying one last thing. So, climate change, a big thing today, President Biden is having a big meeting, and they've created a nonsensical term. It's mathematically nonsense, it's ecologically nonsense, it's economically nonsense, it's ethically bankrupt. Net zero. Net zero, you know, how do I know all this? Because I suffer reading stuff like this book of Gates. Net zero. Net zero is we'll continue to pollute. I'll fly in my private jet all over to fix this government and fix that government. And I will make sure the peasants of India get locked into conditionalities to absorb my carbon. But to do that, they must then be part of a new conditionality system. And that's why Gates is buying land. That is also the reason he is creating new companies for new conditionalities. You went through the tragedy of the 2008 collapse, and 2010, the crisis hit Italy. Today, we could be in a new austerity program for the whole world's working people. This is where Earth democracy matters. We are citizens of the Earth, and that's why we have a right to be as alive as the trees, to be as alive as the pollinators, and they have a right to be alive. Living economies means we have to cultivate economies, and we have to do it beginning from the local. Living democracies means we have to participate in democracy, both the democracy of life, that all beings are related to us, as well as our determination to reclaim our spaces, to make the decisions that allow our communities and societies to thrive. And then living cultures that recognize that the earth is not our enemy, other species are not our enemy, and people of other cultures, other races, other religions are not our enemy. We are one humanity on one planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, perfect timing, 30 minutes sharp. Thank you very much. I would like to share with you that on our YouTube channel, there are many high school students that are connected. And that was also a surprise to me. And I think it's great that our community and our large audience today is composed also by younger people, including secondary school students and also university students, and that so many people joined us today to listen to your talk. I want to remind people that there is a possibility of asking a few questions to Vandana, and you can do that by raising your hands, alzando la mano, oppure scrivendo nei commenti potrete fare delle domande a Vandana Shiva. In the meantime, I start with the one question that I had, and I really appreciate how you really were able to integrate colonialism, enlightenment, renaissance, and all these cultural things into your discussion. I strongly believe that the crisis that we live in its intermingled crisis altogether is in essence a cultural crisis, and there also the transition that we need to start and sustain is a cultural transmission, a cultural transition. So for example, you were making distinctions, for example, within also Western philosophy and culture between, for example, the Enlightenment and the Renaissance. So it's like there are different layers within Western culture, and some of them are certainly justifying extraction and destruction and selfishness and separation, while some others are inherently permeated with regenerative thinking and with these ideas of connectedness and care for the earth and respect. So since one of the current focus of my research is precisely regenerative culture, and how can we mobilize cultural forms that we select as being compatible with this new paradigm, and how can we reclaim also part of Western culture and other cultures in the service of the regeneration of the earth. I want to ask you now, what do you think is the role of culture, and in particular of cultural institutions, like, for example, this institution we are at today, which is a university college? What is the role of cultural institutions in fostering this new paradigm that, toward this cultural shift that we really need to activate this just transition and this process of earth democracy you were talking about?
Yeah. So first, in our language, we have the word Sanskriti for culture, that which holds. But we have another word for that which destroys, which is Vikriti. And I remember, the former president of the Tibetan government in exile was with me for a talk. And someone asked a question about the culture of war. And he said, you cannot have a culture of war, because culture is that which binds, which creates interconnectedness. That which breaks is Vikriti. It cannot be culture. Don't elevate it to the level of culture. You talked about different ways of looking at the world, and we talked about the difference between the Enlightenment, which was man will only be liberated by breaking their bonds with nature. That's Bacon, that's Locke, that's Hobbes, that's Smith, breaking your umbilical cord with nature. And they really thought they could, but they didn't realize they were breaking that umbilical cord because they were standing on our backs in the colonies. We were supporting them. If they had lived only on the Manchester mills, they'd have been very dead. But they lived on the slave labor of the Africans. They lived on taking the land of the Native Americans. They lived on the indigo from India. They lived on the rent collection from India, 145 trillion, I thought. That's what made them live, not the separation from nature, but the grabbing of our resources. So I talked about my background in quantum theory. There is another fellow physicist, Fritz of Capra, and he wrote a book called Tao of Physics, but an important, even more important book is a book called The Science of Leonardo. The Science of Leonardo is about how the Renaissance was about a science of oneness and interconnectedness. And I was hospitalized once in the hospital where Leonardo used to do his experiments, and I was very serious. So I have a very, very fond relationship with Leonardo. So I think Italy has a lot to not only go deep into recovering this culture, but because you're a very you're not old. Britain is old. That you have the formations of decentralized governance much more. We need to tap that. So we need to tap self-organized governance in the human community and recognizing that we have to be one with nature, realizing that every life form is self-organized. And this is where the break with enlightenment comes. In enlightenment, if you're separate, you have to be at war. Whereas in ecology and any culture that's ecological culture, you're not separate, you're autonomous, self-organized, but interconnected. And that's the 400 years of numbing of our brains, where atomization makes interconnectedness impossible. Whereas self-organization makes interconnectedness necessary. Through cooperation and mutuality, we create the cultures. And the science of this is what universities should be looking at. The economics department should be looking at economics of solidarity, local circular economies, not the new stuff that, if everything was in container ships, then if we shifted the container ships from fossil fuel to biofuel, we could do this. My God, if you needed all of the land of the world for fueling container ships to move goods around and grew nothing locally, this whole earth would be destroyed anyway, even with biofuel. So these are the issues we need to go deeper into.
Thank you. Well, since I don't see other questions, I'm gonna ask you one more because ci sono domande?
Maybe Joseph.
Sì, prima magari fa la domanda lui
Ok.
e poi eventualmente... Prego.
Ok.
Possiamo far partire la domanda, Joseph. Poi se non ce n'è altre ne ho una anch'io.
Ah, ok, va bene, intanto mi paleso. Good morning and thank you very, very much for your inspiring words. And it's been very inspiring and interesting to hear what you had to say, so thank you for that. My name is Joseph Incerello. I'm a former student of Scuola Superiore di Catania, University of Catania. I am now a student at the LSE in London. That's where I'm talking from. A bit of note, I come from Sicily, and in my area we have a very large oil refining plant since the 70s, which has caused cancer, has caused many negative effects. The interesting point to our discussion is that that plant was authorized and supported by local authorities and regional authorities, which at the time didn't have either the environmental knowledge, of course, but also the strength to withstand the lure of money, if you will, the potential for creating jobs, while maybe a national government could have the strength to say, no, I'm gonna do something else instead. I'm gonna propose an alternative plan. So my first question is, isn't there a risk in the centralizing government? And the risk is laying the door open to corporate influences more than instead of having a single national administration. By the way, you can imagine, like, I study political science, so that's where my question is coming from. That's my first question. And the second one is, you've talked about, and you've said very interesting things about Western countries and colonization, and I think what you said are not simply opinions, they are historical facts at this point. But I wanted to ask you, we have the Anglo-Saxon model of capitalism, and there is an alternative. There are many theoretical alternatives, but the main real alternative now is command economies, China. Restriction of human rights, restriction of liberal rights. So what do you have to say within the discourse you made, within the narrative of ecologism, feminism, and so on? What do you have to say on rising economies, on Asian countries, especially on China? And a final point, if you can make a comment on this, and then I'm done, I wouldn't want to take too much time. From what I know, the main plastic emitters are Asian countries, in particular China, Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia. What is the role of developing countries in pollution? Thank you very much.
Okay, so when I talk about having more power at the level where people can participate so that they can prevent harm to nature and prevent harm to themselves, that participatory democracy, that participation can only be where people can actually participate. Yeah, you cannot participate, for example, in something happening in New York, but in your community in Sicily you can. The fact that there have been times where local governments are the ones that to introduce destructive activities that are harming the environment, the ecosystem, the local communities, is because big interests find their openings wherever they can. You say, wouldn't centralized be good? You need centralization to keep out the harm. It would be impossible for everyone, for national governments to say, spread glyphosate, and then you have small governments locally trying to fight glyphosate. So you need to prevent harm at the highest level. Choosing the positive should be at the local level. And so I say, for me, biodiversity is not just about the diversity of life forms, it is about diversity of cultures. It is about diversity of economies. We can't have one world economy The same trashy food sold all over the world. The same junk clothing now, you know. When I used to come to Italy, my little son used to be so impressed. He said, Mama, even the drivers here dress so well. Even the workers are in absolutely perfect clothing. Yeah? But now you've got junk clothing, which is cheaper. You know, your H&Ms and your Zaras are creating slave factories to create junk clothing. So you've had good clothing and good food, and you know what the junking down means by this illusion of cheap, which is very costly for the planet and is extremely costly for the people who work. Those who are displaced, I mean, look at the textile industry of northern Italy, absolutely wiped out after the 2010 crisis with outsourcing. So what we need is biodiversity of economies, and we need biodiversity of democracy. Wherever you can, build the strength to protect the earth and human rights. Somewhere it'll be local, and people are declaring rights of local rivers in all over the world. Some places it'll be national, like this evening I'll be, the Bolivian meeting. They're going to know, they've started the Rights of Mother Earth Declaration, but now they're writing a bill on declaring ecocide as a crime and protecting the defenders of the earth who are constantly being criminalized and thrown into jail. And later this night, I will be addressing the European Parliament, which is similarly totally unconnected, working on laws on protecting the rights of Mother Earth. So we have to work at any level. There is no perfect level because there is no perfect government, because there is no perfect moment. There are times where leaders come who are absolutely brilliant and do the best for the common good. And then you get leaders who've been put there by big money who will do everything to make big money bigger. So things, we live in this constant flux. And therefore, we have to use this political space wherever it is, and not just in isolation. This is where it's important. I have done I've built the movement on GMOs. Well, I said, let's begin with local communities going GMO free. Then in Italy, we started GMO free regions. Then we connected them Europe level. And the reason they had Brexit is they wanted to break the European GMO free status. I watched the Brexit grow by saying Britain will opt out of the GMO biosafety laws. Your third question on the strength and rising economies. A part of what I said today was, what do you see as the economy? Do you see the economy in its original meaning of the system of living, the management of your household, which is the ecological household, the social household? Or do you see the economy as the extractive mechanism for the money machine? If you see the money machine as the economy, then of course, the more you can extract, the more the economy grows. The economy grew by America outsourcing all its production to China. So China in those terms is a giant. But look at America. The corporations got richer. I know when they outsourced software to India, I witnessed this in the free trade agreements. $40 billion is the annual saving of the IT giants, the tech giants in America, for turning India into their software capital in Bangalore and Hyderabad, etc. They pay much lower salaries to the same job for the same job. Outsourcing of jobs from America, what has it meant? It has meant young 18-year-old kids who have no hope for the future are taking guns and shooting people dead. Just look at the number of killings in the schools of America. This is all part of a false creation of growth, which is actually creating scarcity in terms of livelihoods, but more in terms of economic and ecological security. So for the young people listening today, I would say, you are not too young to shape your future. Your future is in your hands. Get together in groups. After all, little groups have got together and created Fridays of the future, but they're linear. They're only about climate change, and they're only about a strike on the future. But we have to look at the multidimensional. Start getting together and say, what kind of food system do we want? What kind of governance system do we want? What kind of economy do we want? Local or 5 corporations controlling the economy? And then don't just make that plan. Start organizing, putting influence on your commune, on your region, to start making those plans real. And I would add, because this morning, I've been addressing these tribunals on these things on ecocide. If Mother Earth has rights, then violating her rights is an ecological crime. This crime is now being defined and redefined. And today I've had letters from major leaders on how they're working in their parliaments on defining ecocide as a crime. I organized a tribunal, a Monsanto tribunal, on a trial of Monsanto for the crime of ecocide, destroying species on Earth, but killing people also. So be courageous, be bold, be visionary. Never allow fear and hopelessness to enter your heart and your mind.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vandana. This is very inspiring. I'm also really thrilled to know that you're going to address the European Parliament, and there are also this discussion going on regarding ecocide and earth rights. That's beautiful. I saw that there was someone, Giuseppe San Giorgio, who raised their hands. Maybe we have time for 1 or maybe 2 questions. Okay, bye, Giuseppe.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Giuseppe San Giorgio, a medical student of the University of Catania and also Scuola Superiore di Catania. Firstly, I want to thank you for your beautiful and interesting speech. I have 2 questions to do. We all know that due to human activities over the last 100 years, the world has warmed by approximately 0.85 degrees. According to World Health Organization, climate change affects the social and environmental determinants of health, like clean air, safe drinking water, sufficient food, and secure shelter. The first question is, how can we respond to these changes, and what policies and what individual choices should we implement? Whereas, for the second question, we also know that all populations are affected by climate change, but some are more vulnerable than others. For example, areas with weak health infrastructure, like developing countries, will be the least able to cope without assistance to respond to this climate change. Thank you.
Yeah. So, as I described, climate change is a consequence of a shift in our energy base from the energy of human beings who worked and animals who worked to fossil fuels, and displacement of this living energy by fossil fuel energy. Mining 600 million years of the Earth's fossilization of carbon. So we have 2 kinds of carbon. There's living carbon, which is the green leaf in the trees, which takes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And you have the dead carbon, which emits more and more carbon dioxide. But 600 million years of carbon dioxide embodied in that dead carbon being burnt every year, 20 million years of worth of that carbon is being burnt in the fossil civilization. That is what greenhouse gas emissions are. And that's what's leading to climate change. Now, the Earth system is self-organized. That's why she's called Gaia. And it is these amazing cycles of nitrogen, of different minerals, of carbon, of water, all of these cycles. It's the rupture of the cycle that is then leading to climate change. How does the cycle rupture? You emit more than you can absorb. How do you solve it? By stopping the emissions, and that's why I'm totally critical of net zero. I say real zero. You don't need fossil fuels, and definitely not in agriculture. You can do a fossil fuel free farming. That's what I practice. That's what I train. We've trained 1 million farmers or more. We work in 25 states of India. And our work is showing that not only do you grow more food, you grow more health, and you solve the climate problem. That's why I wrote a book called Soil Not Oil, which is also available in Italian. So we can begin in our personal lives to make a difference to the climate catastrophe by beginning with eating and building local food economies. And you in Sicily are very well placed for it. But it cannot stop there. You can do the right thing, and those who are destroying the climate continue to do the wrong thing with their net zero, saying we'll continue to pollute, but we'll make you behave differently. That's why I always talk about climate justice. I come from the part of the world which is bearing the worst costs of climate change. 2009, we had a super cyclone in the Bay of Bengal, 30,000 people dead. Every year there's a new cyclone. Last year it was Amphan. I'm from the Himalaya. The Himalayan communities don't use fossil fuels at all. There's zero fossil fuel users, and yet our glaciers are melting. In Ladakh, floods are coming. In my region, floods are coming. People are dying. This is not 100 years down the line, people will die. Those who did not cause the pollution are the ones paying the highest price. And therefore, we need to come to the issue of climate justice. And how do you address climate justice? In 1992, when we wrote the Earth's Climate Treaty and the Biodiversity Treaty, we wrote two internationally binding treaties. We put in place two international principles. The first is precaution. If you have a new technology, you don't rush it. You will err on the side of caution if you don't know enough. We said on GMOs, err on the side of caution, precautionary principle. Geoengineering, stop the experiments, err on the side of precaution. And the other very important was polluter should pay. So instead of net zero, saying the polluter will decide how others will pay, that's where the young people having their local discussions, organizing their local assemblies, organizing their local tribunals. No level is too small. No person is too small to bring justice. We didn't get freedom just like that. The South Africa didn't get apartheid just like that. We began one person at a time, groups at a time. And then, as Gandhi said, and these circles then expand horizontally, not vertically, and ever expanding, never ascending oceanic circles. That's what we need to create for the protection of Mother Earth and protection of people's rights. And we have to do that. Beauty is, and this to me is the most inspiring part of this work, that whatever you do to protect Mother Earth creates more abundance. It creates economies of abundance. And that's the reason you shouldn't see it as a sacrifice. Oh, we have to sacrifice to protect the earth. No, protecting the earth is your duty, and the earth gives you in abundance. And that's my lifetime of 50 years of work, research and action has shown.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vandana. This is so inspiring. And I want to ask if there are other questions or comments from anybody in the room. Otherwise, I think we can close this meeting. In Italy, it's almost lunchtime, and so I hope every one of us will go eat good local food, not international junk food. And I'm really inspired and moved by your words, Vandana, and I'm really thankful that you were with us, but also that you are there as an activist, as such an energetic voice, and as a person who is able to work on so many different levels, from local agriculture, from like manually weeding and harvesting and saving seeds, to talking to really the world players, to the European parliaments, and to national governments, and to non-profit organizations, to advocate for the earth, to celebrate the earth. And I think that this talk today for us was an injection of obstinate optimism, I think, and And you know, this the inspiration of like being aware that like nobody is so small to really do nothing, and we can do many different things, and we can start with the local, we can start with culture, we can regenerate our culture, we can start from science even, because science is also a powerful tool. We can start with our choices of the food we eat, of the clothes we buy. You know, we can really start from many different things to, you know, do something like for the earth. And then once we start, I realized this with my experience as well. Once you start, you immediately receive a positive feedback from nature. You feel more connected, you feel better. And so that's, you know, that's an encouragement to go on. And yeah, Vandana, please.
Yeah, well, you know, you said that, and I just remembered. So one of the slogans of making people pay for the adjustment is half for nature. So in my new paper, which I will make sure I send to Maria, you know, everything comes from nature. So it's all from nature, all for nature. If we do everything keeping nature in mind, what clothes we wear, what food we eat, that is where it'll be well-being for all. So it's all for nature, all from nature, for the well-being of all, rather than half for nature, for my greed. You know, you can't say to nature, just half for you. No billionaire has the right or the power to tell nature, half is for you, the rest is for me.
Yeah, Diro, thank you so much for the words.
Okay, but
I'm gonna thank you, and I wish you best of luck on your upcoming meetings today and in the future, and very good health. And it's good to see you so energetic and in good health today. Thank you very much.
Love to Sicily. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Vandana. Thank you from the Scuola Superiore. Bye.
Grazie a tutte e a tutti per aver partecipato così numerosi, e grazie alla Scuola Superiore per aver organizzato questo incontro. Buona festa della Terra!
Buona festa della Terra!
Grazie, arrivederci.
Grazie, arrivederci.